Hi, thanks for watching this training video from the OCHRE Data Service. In this video, you will learn how to do some basic data entry. For this demonstration, we'll be using the project called Ceramic Repository for the Orontes Watershed. This project is part of a larger research project called the CRANE project, which stands for the Computational Research on the Ancient Near East. You can find out more about the CRANE project at crane.utoronto.ca. In this demonstration, we'll be entering some sites discovered from survey archaeology. And so we'll be just entering a couple of sites and the information about those sites, and then I'll explain how I did all the stuff that I did during the data entry. So I'm just going to start by entering two examples, and then I'll return to explain some of the tools that I used along the way. So the first example I have already exists in the database. Now this will be up for your team to decide, whether data exists already in the database or whether you're adding new data. But we have a couple of tools for this particular project to use. You can either search by site name or you can search by site ID. And site ID is a specific ID that's assigned by this project. Let's search by name and see what we find. The survey that I'm dealing with has found a site called OCHRE, and it's probably known by many other names. So I'm just going to search with an asterisk variable and see if I can find anything that matches somewhat closely. And I found a couple of things that begin with KAR, and it's probably this third one, so I'm just going to open up and look at it. And this is indeed the site I want. So what we have here are a couple of observations. The first observation is just the very generic information saying that this is an archaeological site. This is the CRANE ID. We have the English name here, and we have the project assigned identification here as an abbreviation. We also have a second observation. So the second observation came from a specific survey by a Gunnar Lehmann. So he is linked here as a person, giving him attribution for this observation. What I'm going to do is add a third observation, because I'm actually dealing with another survey altogether. And I'm going to give it some properties, and I'll explain all of this later. So I've set this up to add in the survey archaeologist Courtois, Jean-Claude Courtois, if I remember correctly. And it gives me a predefinition of variables and values where I can enter some information. And Courtois calls this site by this name. So I'm going to type it in there, and I'm going to copy it to the clipboard because I'm going to use it elsewhere. He doesn't give an ancient name, so I'm going to remove that value and save this property sheet. The Save button applies to properties I enter here. So because Courtois calls this something else, I want to enter this as an alias to the name so that when I'm searching for it in the future, it will search against this and this, both the English name that the project has given it and the name that a specific surveyor has given it. So that's why, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So that's from Courtois, and that's the alias he has given us. Great. So now what I would like to do is add some periods. So typically survey archaeologists will find pottery sherds and other information that tells him what period or what periods the site was occupied. So what I did is I came over to the linked items tab over here, and this paperclip button opens and closes the linked items tab. I chose periods from the category pick list, and inside periods we already have a growing list of Near Eastern chronology specifically used for the Ceramic Repository of the Orontes Watershed, or CRO. Okay, so I still have my my new site up here, and I'm on my links tab, which is where I'm going to put periods in this pane here. So Courtois noted 3 periods for this site: early, middle, late Bronze, Iron Age, Hellenistic, and Roman. So I'm just simply going to choose those from the pick list and add them in one at a time. There we go, early, middle, late, Iron Age, and he doesn't get too specific on these. These are very general time frames, Hellenistic period, and Roman period. There we go. So now we have our third observation by Courtois saying that's an archaeological site, the site name, and the links. We could probably at some point add a link to the bibliography specifically citing which publication that Courtois published this information in. Now, had he given us any more specific dates, we would simply drill down to how specific the surveyor noted the period. Typically, I don't really think surveyors get all that specific. Mostly it'll be very general, so you probably typically be choosing these high-level categories. But drill down to as specific as you need or stay as general as you need. So that is essentially done. That's one entry, and had I not been narrating, that would have gone much faster. But if you want to just view the entry overall, you can click this little Eye of Horus, and it will show you everything you've assembled up to this point by observation and period. So there's the name that we gave it, first, second, third observations, etc. That's the compiled set of information about this site. So I think I'm done with that one, so I'm going to save and close. Okay, the next one I'm going to enter is a site that is not yet in the database. So it has not been previously encountered by another surveyor. So what I'm going to do is just navigate to the locations and objects hierarchy, go to the hierarchy that contains all the survey sites in the Orontes watershed, and I'm simply going to add a new entry. This is the list of sites sorted alphabetically, and we can do some tweaking to make this alphabetical sort look a little bit better if need be. Okay, so the site I'm going to add is Tel Ayyun in Syria. Now, this begins with AA, so I'm going to try to add it alphabetically where it should be. I certainly wouldn't need to do that. I could sort this hierarchy alphabetically later. But since I'm right here at the top of the list, I'm just going to add it alphabetically. So here I am on OCHRE Bergi. I'm going to use this up button to add an item immediately before this selected item. So here we go. I'm inserting a new item here, giving it the name that we know so far, and I'm going to assign it a crane ID. Actually, this has already been assigned by crane personnel. There we go. I like to just refresh it so that the path updates right away. There it is in the list. Now, it's important to give it some properties. Last time I used survey observation. At this point, first I want to add the very first just general crane observation or crow observation. So observation number 1 for this particular project is just the general information that it's a site, and we do a little bit of double entry here by entering the crane site ID down here and as an abbreviation. It comes in handy sometimes. Now, if we had GIS data, so shape files, GIS shape files, we could link them right here, right now, as we're going and entering this. So we would have this accumulation of data as we go along. Now I still have to enter one other observation, and this is the observation from the surveyor. So now we're doing essentially what we did last time, is adding a survey observation from Courtois. Sorry, I clicked away without saving, so I want to save. And Courtois, in fact, is the one who gives us this name, so I'm going to credit him for that. Again, he doesn't give us an ancient name. Save that again. And he does give us periods for this time only Chalcolithic, Early Bronze, and Middle Bronze. So I'm going to simply click and add those in there. Great. So just like that, we've added a completely new site. It's done and in the database. There it is. If we have coordinates, we can add those on this coordinates tab right here. Now we can decide, or the project can decide, if they want to add it to observation 1, the very general observation about the site, or to a specific surveyor. In this case, I'm not sure that Courtois gives us this information, so I'm going to just go ahead and add these coordinates myself. And this is 35 degrees by 16 minutes, 10.27 seconds north, by 36, 31, 1596 east. There we go. So now OCHRE knows where this site exists on the map. If I were to click fly to this, it would open Google Earth and fly to it. The recording software I'm using now won't show that, but I invite you to try that at some point. Alright, so that's essentially as easy as it gets. You just add things manually or use the sets of queries to search up things that you think might exist already. So, digging in a little bit behind the scenes now. So if you're just doing data entry, you essentially have everything you need to just really jump in and start doing it. But if you need to sort of understand behind the scenes what's going on, let's take a look at some of the tools I used. So on this Queries tab, we have two pre-configured queries, and let's just take a look at those here in the Queries hierarchy under Project Queries. These are very, very simple queries. Essentially, I've said just look in the CRO project, just consider locations and objects, just consider things that are archaeological sites, and this is set up so that the user can enter whatever value they want in this field. So when we view that query, that field shows up as blank, and we can enter whatever we want in there. I think this is the first one we looked at earlier. It is, okay. So very simple query, but that's already set up just to search by crane ID, and that's why we're putting it as a variable and value on the site, so we can search for it. The other one was the search by name. It's a little bit more complex. It's a query that's a smart search, a string smart search query. Again, just looking in CRO, just looking at locations and objects, just looking at archaeological sites, but also activating this character string tab. The green check mark means the tab is activated. The little X means that that tab is not activated and won't be considered in the query. So because I've activated this tab, it will show up on the view of the query, and you can enter, all kinds of things in here and see what comes up. I entered quite a lot of variables here, so I got a lot of hits. But yeah, and let us know if you need any help on how to do that kind of searching to find what you need to find. So those are the two basic queries I've set up so far. Obviously, give us a holler if you need anything else. As you saw, I simply did some browsing too. I mean, you don't have to query for things. You can, excuse me, you can browse for things right in the hierarchy or in the linked items pane. Just selecting and simply clicking around and browsing. Also, as you saw, OCHRE has this idea of multiple observations, and this is incredibly important for survey archaeology. The way CRO is using this, the first observation would be just the general information about the site, and every new survey would have a new observation. So over time, we're going to build up these multiple observations. And for a project, a database of survey archaeology, what we want to avoid is duplication of sites. So we don't ever want to see Tel Ayyun down here in the list again. If we have something else to say about Tel Ayyun and it comes from somebody else, we'll simply add an observation by clicking this button right here, and we could also delete an observation by clicking this button if we wanted to, but we don't want to do that now. So that's the point of this type of database, is that only one attestation of each project in the list, multiple observations according to multiple surveys. Now, you'll see I used some predefinitions when I was adding the properties to these sites. Some of those are set up already, and these can be tweaked as needed. The two I used were general site, which simply just drops in these two properties. The other one was survey observation, which can be customized to which person is the surveyor. And to change that, you would simply come to Persons and Organizations, come to the list of surveyors, choose who you wanted to, remove the other person, add the other surveyor, save, and you're done. Now this is set up to give the credit to this surveyor for any observations that we would be adding to a site. I'm just going to illustrate that again and change it back to Courtois, save, there we go. And these properties can be duplicated as much as necessary. So let's say, for example, the surveyor you're working with typically gives multiple ancient names, which is valid. You can add as many as you want here, save. And now when I choose this survey observation from the list of predefinitions here, it would add all of the ancient sites that I defined in the predefinition. So this is this idea of predefinitions, saving you a lot of data entry time. So you're really not picking these variables and values from the taxonomy manually every time. You can set up a template of variables and values to use, and it's really just a time-saving feature. Okay, so you saw that I was linking in periods to these sites. This is obviously a central part of doing survey archaeology. You want to know what sites were occupied when. So we have this hierarchy of periods here in the project, and like I said, it's an ever-growing list of periods. These are gray because this general starting list of periods came from another project. Like, this work has been done before already. However, it's fully editable. So if somebody were to suggest a more specific Roman period, you would just come here to Roman period and add a child item to that. Let's just say that they're calling it late Roman period or something like that. And now, because this late Roman period is contained under Roman period, OCHRE knows that this time frame, this period, is a smaller portion of the larger period. So that's, we can just illustrate this point by drilling down into the Bronze Age. So we start very general Bronze Age, drill down, contains early Bronze Age even contains these further subdivisions. So should you come across surveyors who are doing all kinds of custom sub-periods, you can add those here if needed. If we're going to be dealing with site phasing, we can add those here. Like, specifically if we're saying it's not so much a chronological reference that we're making here, but we want to make a reference to phasing from a specific archaeological site, it's added in much the same way. We've only added a few of them at this point. So Katna, for example, uses these major phases. EBLA, we've just started to build out the idea of EBLA level 3, sublevel A, sublevel 1. So I think you see the point. All this is fully customizable as needed. Now, I've mentioned some about resources, specifically GIS resources. Now, as those become available to the project, we would add them to the resources here. And we actually don't even have a hierarchy for them yet, but now we do. So we would simply add resources to this hierarchy and then link them to the specific sites that they reference. And those would be linked here. This will become extremely helpful when we're trying to figure out what site we're dealing with. So when I came back here and did this very broad search for a site that I think is called something with a K and something with an R, I get a list of 30 sites that match that exactly. If I had spatial shape files for all of these sites, I could produce a map of all of these results right here in OCHRE that would allow me then to decide which site a specific surveyor is talking about, because he said it's south of the Orontes, west of whatever. You know, I could really narrow in on which site it is I was talking about. And to do that, you would click this little globe button here, and it would produce a GIS map from these resources. So over time, as we build all this stuff into the ceramic repository in the Orontes Watershed Project, it's going to become a very powerful tool for finding sites and documenting sites. Now, so I've showed you some of the built-in features of OCHRE that are going to help, reduce human error and duplication, things like that, which is absolutely essential. But there still is an important level of the scholar, the human interaction. At some point, somebody is going to have to decide that this Tel Ayyun is a discrete site. It's not attested somewhere else. That will become easier as we get shapefiles and we can actually do the searching of the map and the viewing of the map to help us decide if it's the same site. But we have to be very careful not to duplicate these sites, or else we'll end up with a set of data that isn't very useful. So that's a little bit behind the scenes in terms of how we're actually setting up the project to do the data entry. This should be plenty to get you started doing data entry. As always, please let us know if you have any questions at ochre@uchicago.edu. Thanks a lot.